Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. It's your girl Yarrii from Yarrii's Take the Podcast, where I keep everything raw, uncut, and educational. In this podcast, I hope to reach out to people who are ready to wake up and heal from generational trauma. Stick around to learn something new with each and every episode and see the world through my take. If you haven't done so already, I always say it in every episode, make sure you go follow us on Instagram, Yarrii's Take. You can stream my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So you really don't have a reason why you're not listening to me right now. Anyways, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for being missing in action. Senioritis has caught up to me real bad, but we're here now, and that's what matters. And we're here to make an impact. So let's talk about what this episode is going to look like. And before I do that, for those of you who are new here, Yarrii's Take is a podcast where we dive deep into important issues that are shaping our world today. And in today's episode, we're going to be exploring the BDS movement, which is also the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, in light of the recent news between Palestine and Israel. But before we dive into that, let's take a moment to reflect on the concept that intersects with our conversation today: privilege. What does it even mean? It's a word that just gets thrown out there so comfortably. Let's talk about what it actually means. To simply put it, privilege refers to the unearned advantages or benefits that people receive based on their identity, their background, or their social status. And to be honest, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, or whether we realize it or not, we all have some form of privilege. And let's take a moment to consider what those privileges may look like. To you, especially, I go to a HBCU in America, and we live in a country where sometimes, unfortunately, minorities are kind of more picked on. And it's sad to say, but there is something called white privilege. And I know that immediately, as a minority in America, the first thought that comes to mind of when you think of privilege is white privilege, right? We can talk about how if it were a minority in Kyle Rittenhouse's shoes and did the actions that he did that day, which we're not going to dig into because we're not talking about that today, but we could talk about it if y'all want to in a different episode. But y'all know what he did, and if there was a minority doing what he did, they wouldn't have been let off as easy as he did. So that may be your definition of privilege, right? I want to dig more deeper into how privilege plays a part in our day-to-day lives. And privilege can be having access to quality education, stable employment, reliable health care, or maybe it's the privilege of being born into a supportive family and being able to wake up in the morning and feel safe. A lot of this have this privilege where we sometimes aren't grateful enough for it, and we don't think deeper into it because there's so many underrepresented countries that go through tragedies on a daily basis, and they don't have the privilege of being safe, of having safe and clean food and water, and just being able to live a life where they're not constantly wondering whether or not it's going to be their last day here or not. So I want to, talk about how to empathize and understand what our privilege is and use it to our advantage. I know some of you may kind of be wondering, earlier she said she was going to talk about the BDS movement. What does the BDS movement have to do with privilege? And the issue, it's not really an issue. We all know what it is. It's an occupation, and I'm not going to say the G word because y'all keep shadow banning me, but we all know what the G word is. Anyways, but y'all probably wondering what the BDS movement, the Israeli-Palestine occupation, and privilege all tie together. I promise you it does, so sit down for this ride because we're going to slowly but surely unravel it. Fundamentally, the BDS movement, right, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, it stems from the awareness of privilege. The privilege that some have the opportunity to oppress others based on their race or background. And it's important to approach the subject with such sensitivity, respect, and empathy as we go over the tragedies of what the Israeli and Palestinian people are going through and how this war impacts the role of the BDS in promoting Palestinian rights. Being able to recognize our own privilege allows us to empathize with those who are discriminated against and oppressed. And it should, I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but it should motivate you to take action towards justice and equality. I know I keep saying a lot, and I said this before, and I still got to work on it. But let me just gather my train of thought before I get back into this next point. As I was saying, privilege influences global awareness. You should care how you utilize your privilege, how social media can shape one's perspective, and you just have to be mindful of one-sided resources and doing the right amount of research. I'm aware that in my last video, I may have came off as a little biased when I was trying to spread light and spread awareness on a situation. And for those who are kind of feeling neutral and don't know about the history of Palestine, it may have been a very confusing video for you. But I don't think one episode is enough to dive into the depth of the war that's been going on between Israel and Palestine, because it's not something that is recent. It's not something that happened in the last decade. It's something that's been going on since 1948, but before 1948 as well. And it's such a deep history, and understanding the history between them two allows us to understand why what's happening today. But I'm not going to sit here and bore you with war and politics, because it was obviously not received in the message that I would have liked for you to in my last video. So in this episode, I want to try to humanize the situation and try to get you to see it from a different perspective. And, don't eat me up. Like, I'm still trying to learn how to be comfortable in this platform and speaking on camera and speaking to a global audience through, social media and podcasts and streaming my voice. So I'm still trying to find my voice and find a way I put my message out to you guys without sounding biased, but we are all human at the end of the day. I am going to make mistakes, and I may sound biased especially on situations I'm passionate about. And I want to talk about the comments in my last video. I earlier mentioned how there was some hateful comments, there was some productive, honest feedback. And I appreciate the honest feedback. Like I said, I want to do a better job at trying to educate you guys on a matter without tapping in so much to my personal bias. But at the end of the day, it is Yarrii's Take the Podcast. I am still spilling my own take or two. The important thing is that you take what you need to from this and you form your own opinion. That's what I'm trying to utilize my social media for, to shape different perspectives and show you a different perspective, because last semester I was putting together a project for my victimology class, and my victim population was based on the Palestinian children. And obviously it's a school project, so I have to make sure my research and my data is all accurate and it's authentic, and it's not just from a random website. And when I was doing that, it was so difficult to find an article, something that wasn't one-sided. I found a lot of articles that was pro-Israeli and it was one-sided with the Israel side, and I found a lot of articles that was pro-Palestinian and sided with the Palestinian side. And sometimes it's hard to find double-sided articles. And even so, if you're reading a one-sided article, I really encourage you to look more deeper into it and try to see both perspectives. Because at the end of the day, I'm not saying that what happened to the Israelis isn't tragic. It is. Any life taken is tragic. But I need you to understand the importance and the sensitivity of what the Palestinians are going through, because it's not the same situation, and it's completely unfair of the two very different situations that they're in. They're both in the same war, they're both in the same region, but it's two different realities for two different sides. Being able to sit behind your screen and type hate comments and hate on people, and being able to ignore a crisis that other people are dying from, is also a form of privilege. Oftentimes we forget how privileged we are, and we grow a little obnoxious and become cocky and think that our life is timeless, but it's really not. Life is not guaranteed. Who's to say I'm gonna walk out this door and I'm gonna make it to my car? Anything could happen as I'm walking out that door. I could have, I could have a stroke in the moment as I walk out, or anything could happen. I could get hit by a car. Nothing is ever guaranteed. Just because we're not in a war doesn't mean our lives are guaranteed to make it into the next day. So don't you want to make sure that before you leave this temporary dunya, that you leave an impact and make a difference, and know that as you're leaving, you left something, you left your seeds and it's sprouting, and you're educating people, you If you educate one person, that person's going to educate another person. That's your seeds that you planted. I'm not talking about leaving back a legacy like a child. I'm talking about knowledge. I'm talking about making a difference, right? And this is where I'm going to tie back to the BDS movement, because it is Black History Month, where we're going to talk a little about Black History Month and how those historical figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks left their impact. They're not here with us today, but they made an impact and they left their impact on the world. And that should be our goal. You know, waking up every day with a reason, waking up with a reason to make a difference, whether that's in your own life, whether that's in your families, your child's, the people around you, people who are oppressed, just being a voice for the voiceless. I'm constantly saying this. We need to be the voice for the voiceless, because if it were you, you would want the entire world to scream for you. So let's go scream for them. Before I get into any historical figures or change the topic, I want to talk a little about a Palestinian family specifically. Well, maybe two, because we keep seeing statistics. I remember when we were at the DC protest in November and I interviewed people, at that time, we were mourning for 7,000 lives. That was in November. We're in February right now. That's 4 months. And in a matter of 4 months, the number of 7,000 just tragically increased up to 30,000. And it's genuinely upsetting and heartbreaking. To people, it's just a number. It's just another statistic, another death toll. And I think if the media, social media news did a better job at trying to humanize these people, maybe we might have more compassion and empathy, and we could foster empathy towards these people, and especially for the people who are biased and already have a biased judgment against the Palestinian people. It's important for them to see the human side of them so they can relate to them on a human-to-human level and try to speak out for them and support their rights to defend themselves, support their rights to live. And this family, it was a Palestinian mother. Her name was Nihad Mohammed Abu Jazar. She lived in the South District of Gaza, and she was a victim of the Israeli bombings. Her home was striked, where it killed 14 members of her family and left her infant daughter without any legs. They had to amputate her legs. This happened on October 11th of 2023, so a couple days after the October 7th attack. And she was asleep with her baby Fatima, who was only 14 months at the time. They woke up to the noise of rockets and were under the rubble of their home in just a matter of seconds. You go to bed safe and sound, hoping and praying that you'll wake up safely the next morning with your head on a pillow, but you're waking up with a bunch of rubble on top of you, and you have a 14-month-old baby. I can't imagine what was going on in her head as she was waiting to be rescued. There were only 3 survivors. It was Nihad, her daughter Fatima, and one other woman who survived the attack. Her baby was her only wish. She wished and prayed to have a child for years, and Fatima was conceived through IVF. They spent 14 years with her spouse trying to have a daughter. 14 months into her daughter being alive, she had to lose her legs. Like, I don't even think she ever got a chance to learn how to walk. And it's just really upsetting having to hear these stories of people and people still not understanding that this is not something. These people are not animals. These people are not terrorists. Yes, a terrorist organization have striked an attack on October 7th. Yes, that is facts. And every time I talk about this, people want to tie it back to Hamas. I'm not talking about Hamas. I'm not talking about what Hamas did. I'm talking about a Palestinian family, a mother and a 14-month-old baby. They did nothing. It ties back into my metaphor with my last podcast. In America, if there's a school shooter in an elementary school, you're not going to bomb the entire school to get rid of the shooter, risking all those kids' lives. So please explain to me the reasoning behind Israel's defenses and their military bombing these civilian homes day and night since October 7th. I think we're at, like 118 days of war. 30,000 and more lives have been lost What did these people do to deserve this? Even the animals don't have rights. The animals are suffering from dehydration, from malnourishment. You're not only attacking the people, you're attacking the livestock, you're attacking the wildlife, you're attacking any chance of there just being life on that land. And with Palestine having such a rich history, it's a shame that you're doing this to a holy land. And it's not just a holy land for Muslims, it's a holy land for the Christians and the Jews. For those who celebrate Christmas, did you educate your family members this Christmas? Because while the world was ignoring a genocide happening, Jesus' birthplace was being bombed. Christmas was canceled where Jesus was born. It's not a Muslim community issue, and a lot of people don't support pro-Palestine because they think it's a Muslim issue. And, you know, a lot of people have a lot of biases against the Muslims, but it's not just a Muslim issue. I don't know how many times I got to say that to you. There's a hadith that my beloved friend, I always think of her when I think of this hadith because she always says it, and I think it's very impactful and kind of relevant to our conversation. Our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "Whoever among you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. If he cannot do so, then change it with his tongue. If he still cannot do so, then with his heart," which is the weakest level of faith. And what that basically means is if you see wrong, try to change it with your hand. Do something about it. Physically try to change it. If you physically cannot do anything about it, then try to change it with your tongue. That means making an impact, educating people around you, trying to spread kindness into other people's hearts and giving them a different perspective. And if you still cannot do anything about it, then you've tried both ways. Then you hate it with your heart and you pray on it and you pray that the situation gets better, right? There's 3 different ways on how you can make an impact, and it's so impactful, and it's a really righteous way to live. Put yourself in their shoes and try to picture how you would feel. I don't think we could even last an hour, if I'm being honest with you. We live in such a comfortable lifestyle, a comfortable world where I don't think a lot of y'all would even know what to do in that situation. Take the 15-year-old boy, for example, and I wish I knew his name right now, but a 15-year-old boy in Gaza was able to generate power from wind. 15-year-old boy generated power from wind. Can you do that? Because I can't. I just recently learned how to change my tire. Can we, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if you do, and if you do, it's probably really cool, but it's like, can you imagine what they're having to resort to? Their normal and our normal is completely not even on the same boat at all. It's not even in the same category. It's so far from each other. And being able to humanize these people, being able to understand that they're humans and they all have stories and they're not just all statistics, what they're going through opened the eyes of many around the world. It has opened so many eyes, and I hope that it, through people who are spreading awareness, through people who want to make a difference, we continue to do so, because the people who are finally seeing the truth and opening their eyes, they're the ones who are out there protesting. They're the ones out there endorsing donations and making donations and boycotts. I know y'all think the boycotts don't work, but they do. You need to continue educating people, continue donating, continue boycotting, continue demanding a permanent ceasefire, not a 4-minute break for people to catch their breath. I don't even want to talk about that. Anything you're capable of, do it now. As we reflect on the significance of Black History Month, it's important to acknowledge the profound impact of historical boycotts, such as the Montgomery bus boycott, which shaped the landscape of social activism, at least in America. The Montgomery bus boycott, led by historical figures like Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was such a powerful demonstration of collective resistance against racial segregation and oppression. And it made a difference, right? People have the rights that they have today because of movements like this, because of boycotts like this. Like the Montgomery bus boycott, BDS is also a non-violent protest movement that seeks to challenge systems of oppression and advocate for the rights of the underrepresented communities. In a world that can feel divided, let's lean on being understanding and having empathy towards others, especially during this important month of Black History Month. And let me remind y'all, right, before I even say my next tidbit, Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they are historical figures in today's history books, today's society. Everybody learns about them. They're not prophets. They're not gods. They're not a holy person. They were regular people like you and me. But because they said no in the face of oppression and they stood up and they fought for their rights, we have rights today. We have an impact in today's generation. Today's society of the Black community does not have to face the struggles of what their society had to face to because of the accomplishments and the struggles that they fought for. And it's our time to shine. You need to be standing on the right side of history. Do you not want your name? I don't know if we're gonna really become historical figures, and it would be nice to, but that's not the point of why we should do it. The point is, the people who did this in the past and had an impact and made a difference were regular people like you and me. So who's to say that you or me can't make a difference? What is stopping you? What's really stopping me? What's really in our way? Like, what are you afraid of? I'm not telling you to join a dangerous organization and go fight for your life. I'm telling you to speak up in the face of oppression. I'm not asking you for the world. I'm asking you to have some empathy, to have some compassion, leave some prayer, leave some positivity, leave some donations, participate in the boycotts, participate in being a voice for the voiceless. We need to listen to each other's stories. We need to learn from the past and work towards a future where everyone's rights are protected and respected. That really wraps up today's episode. I hope that, I was able to reach you on a human-to-human level. Like I said in my last podcast, I feel like I threw a lot of different facts at you, and it was a lot to take in, and probably my biased perspective didn't really help shape a perspective for you. But you have the resources to do your own research. You have the tools to form your own opinion. And I'm just begging you to be on the side of humanity. It's not fair to the little babies who lost their lives. The majority population in Gaza is children. It's not fair to these children that they have to grow up orphaned, that they have to grow up without their limbs, without a clean bathroom to use. It's not fair, and I just hope that we are able to recognize the privilege that we all hold and recognize that this all ties back down into a bigger picture, bigger than you and me, and bigger than politics as a whole. This goes back into many forms of oppression that so many different communities had to go through and are still going through today. And shout out to South Africa, because they did their big one. And just stay updated, keep yourself educated, keep posting, keep boycotting, keep educating yourself. I repeated that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to ramble and find my closing and find an outro, but I'm gonna find it eventually, and I'm slowly working my way up. Bear with me for like 2 seconds, and I'm gonna meet you right there. How do I tie this all up? I think I did a pretty good job at tying it up. Honestly, like sometimes it just happens. Like I don't have a clean outro prepared for you. I thought I did, and I actually have it, and I'm looking at it right in front of me, but I'm not going off word per word what I have in front of me. I'm just looking at what the topic is and how I'm tying it together while I talk and make it sound natural, because this is in my tone and this is how I'm trying to talk to you. So, as I was saying, happy Black History Month. Have empathy. Make sure you know that you're privileged and you're utilizing your privilege to make a difference. And until next time, keep spreading love.